busiest corner of town. Traffic thundered and no one cared except Amira. With patched shoes and a bag stitched together, she noticed an old man frozen at the curb, his cane trembling as cars sped past. Everyone else ignored him. Some even laughed at her for stepping forward. But Mira didn't flinch. She locked her grip, guided him through honking horns and rushing tires, steadying his stumble until they reached the other side. She thought it ended there, but the old man's eyes held a secret, and that moment was only the beginning of something that would shake the entire town. Before we go any further, we'd love for you to hit that subscribe button. Your support means the world to us, and it helps us bring you even more powerful stories. Now let's begin. Morning light had peeled over the small town like thin gold paint, but it never reached the narrow streets where she walked. Her backpack hung low, stitched at the seams with mismatched thread. The soles of her shoes felt the bite of every pebble. She kept her head up anyway, breathing slow, counting each step like it mattered. The bakery on the corner pushed out warm air and cinnamon. She paused a second, closed her eyes, and moved on. Traffic roared at the main crosswalk. Buses snorting, scooters weaving, headlights blinking even in daylight. She stopped at the curb, hugged her elbows, and let the wind from a speeding truck rattle the loose zipper on her bag. That's when she noticed him. An old white man stood a few feet away, cane trembling at the tip, hat tilted wrong, breath shallow. He pressed his lips together as if the whole road had teeth. She watched his right shoe edge forward, then slipped back. He adjusted his sleeve, glanced at the flood of cars, blinked hard. No one slowed. A couple walked past with iced coffees. The man lifted his phone, took a picture of something over her shoulder. Never saw either of them. A teen on a scooter laughed into his mic, swerved, and left a smell of fuel and rubber behind. From behind the mailbox, two women whispered like the town's radio. "That's the girl who cleans after school," one said, barely moving. "Her lips always looks tired." The other hummed, "MMMM. People like her should focus on their own problems." They shifted their bags, eyes sliding away. When she glanced back, she felt the chafe of the backpack strap on her collarbone and rolled her shoulder once she could keep walking. She had a shift later, homework after, and a sink that whined when the tap turned still. The way his knuckles whitened on the cane, the way his breath caught like a clock. Skipping seconds wouldn't let her move. She stepped closer, palms open, pulse steadying to a quieter beat. The city's noise pressed against her ribs. Heat rose from the asphalt, carrying a sour mix of oil and old rain. She lined her shoes with the painted white of the crosswalk, tested her balance, and waited for a seam in the traffic. Cars blink by like metal fish. She inhaled, exhaled, counted to 3. A horn flared. Tires hissed. She lifted her hand, small but sure, and the first driver eased. Then the next one, breath 2. She edged forward half a step, then another, checking his feet, the cane the distance to the opposite curb. Her fingers hovered near his forearm, close enough to catch, not close enough to startle. He angled, his body wavered. Steadied, she shifted her weight to her back leg, ready if his ankle buckled. From the shade of a bus shelter, a couple of boys muttered, "Wild how she acts like a hero." One said, pretending not to watch, "For what? Nobody's filming." The other shrugged, then kept looking anyway. The light changed, engines grumbled. She felt time stretch long and thin. She waited for the surge to fade, for the LOL to open like a doorway. Then softly, carefully, she moved with him, not dragging, not rushing, just a quiet escort through a river of noise. Each step placed like a word she refused to swallow. At the midpoint, a bus mirror side passed the edge of her sleeve. She didn't flinch, she adjusted, guided, breathed him into a rhythm that matched the painted lines. The far curb seemed far enough to doubt and close enough to trust. Sweat gathered at her hairline. Her fingers tingled. They reached the last stripe. She eased him onto clean pavement, checked his footing, and let the noise recede into ordinary sound again. Her chest rose, fell. Her shoulders dropped a fraction. She brushed a fleck of dust from her skirt, slipped the backpack higher, and without ceremony prepared to continue her day behind her. The town kept moving in front of her. The day opened just a little. The old man's weight leaned heavier on the cane. Once they reached the sidewalk, his breath rasped in his chest, but he kept nodding, as if telling himself he had survived another crossing. The girl lingered a moment, half turning her bag strap in her hands. She didn't expect thanks, she didn't expect anything. She had only done what felt right. Still his voice reached her thin, worn but edged with gratitude. You kept me from falling. He tapped the cane lightly like punctuation. His eyes searched her face, trying to read a name he didn't know. She tilted her head, gave a small smile that barely lasted, and muttered that anyone would have done it. Then she shifted her bag, stepping away as if to fade back into the crowd. But not everyone agreed. From the bus stop, two teenagers watched with folded arms. One scoffed loud enough to sting. That's the girl with the patched shoes. Look at her pretending like she's somebody's guardian. The other sneered, whispering, wait till she trips herself. Always playing saint. Their laughter tangled with the hum of engines and spilled toward her ears. She pretended not to hear, but her cheeks warmed. Her fingers picked at the frayed corner of her backpack strap. She'd heard versions of that tone all her life, the voice that measured her worth against what she didn't have. Yet the old man's expression cut through the noise. His eyes weren't mocking, they carried something else. Something quieter, almost thoughtful. A truck coughed black smoke as it pulled away. The girl blinked against it, adjusted her balance, and offered him a nod before walking off. Her stride was steady, but her heart beat faster. She wondered if she looked foolish, helping a stranger, when her own home leaked rainwater through the roof. But she couldn't shake the image of his cane trembling in traffic, and how close his shoes had come to slipping. The old man stayed where he was, leaning on his cane, watching her disappear down the street. A car door slammed nearby, startling him, but his gaze didn't move. His lips curved, not into amusement but recognition, as if he'd just witnessed something the rest of the town had missed. By the bakery window, two women who'd watched the crossing whispered again, strange child, she's always giving what she can't afford to give. One of them tapped the glass absent-mindedly, eyes on the emptying street. And yet maybe that's why I can't stop noticing her. Meanwhile, the girl rounded the corner, shoulders set against the whispers. She tugged her sweater sleeve lower, tightened the knot on her backpack strap, and let the noise of the town fold back over her. Her kindness hadn't cost her anything except attention she didn't want, but still her chest carried a weight not of shame, but of something she couldn't yet name. She didn't see the old man straighten slowly, glance once more in her direction, and walk away, with a mind already turning. The week moved on in its ordinary rhythm, school bells, cleaning shifts, and the tired shuffle of evenings, where homework was balanced against dishes and laundry. The girl kept her head down, repeating the cycle she had known for as long as she could remember. What she didn't notice was that someone else had begun watching her path. It happened on a late afternoon, when the light tilted golden, and the streets smelled faintly of cut grass and wood smoke. A knock rattled against the flimsy front door of her family's small home. She froze mid-step, her hands damp from scrubbing a pan. Visitors never came. Her mother glanced up, frowning, then wiped her palms on her apron and cracked the door open. Standing there, framed in sunlight, was the same old man she had helped days before, except now he didn't look lost or fragile. His shoulders were straight, his boots firm against the porch boards, and his cane leaned lightly in his hand. More as habit than need, behind him rumbled a truck, its bed stacked with wooden crates painted with the familiar name. The largest farm in town. The sight of that name made her breath hitch. That farm wasn't just land. It was power. It was the very backbone of the community, supplying market, schools, and restaurants. And here was its owner standing at her door. The girl's mother stammered, offering a hesitant greeting, but the man's gaze shifted toward the girl herself. His eyes softened and he nodded slowly, as if confirming something he already knew. You didn't recognize me, did you? His voice carried strength. Now calm and deliberate, she shook her head, still holding the dripping dish rag. feeling out of place in her own doorway. He stepped inside with careful respect, not letting his boots scuff the worn rug. His gaze lingered on the leaking ceiling, the patched furniture, the corners that spoke of quiet struggle. He touched the brim of his hat and spoke low but certain. That day at the crossing you thought you were helping a stranger. But I knew the truth in that moment. You didn't weigh the cost. You didn't measure whether it was worth it. You just chose to hold on. The farmhouse owner's voice lingered in the dim room, steady and deliberate. Amira's mother gripped the dish towel tighter, her eyes darting between the stranger and her daughter. She knew his name now, Mr. Callahan, the wealthiest landowner in 3 counties. His name carried authority in markets, in schools, even in the town council chamber where decisions about water, taxes, and futures were made. But in this moment, his gaze wasn't filled with the sharpness of a man used to commanding. It was searching. You didn't weigh the cost, he repeated softly. You didn't hesitate. And that's why I'm here. Amira shifted her weight, still damp from the dishwater, unsure whether to step back or forward. She felt the seams of her patched shoes pressing into her toes, grounding her in reality. The old man's hand tightened on his cane, not from frailty, but as though bracing himself to reveal something heavier than age. I watched you, he said, not just at the crosswalk. I've seen you in this town before, picking up scraps others left, carrying bags twice your size, and still you carried yourself with dignity. His words burned against the room's silence. Her mother's lips parted, but no answer came. Then came the shift. His tone hardened, not against her, but against forces she hadn't yet named. There are people in this town, he said, who believe worth is measured in acres and accounts, who believe patched shoes mean a patched soul. They laugh at kindness because they've long forgotten how to practice it. He leaned forward. And those same people are circling this family, circling this home. They'd rather see you silenced than see you rise. A chill trickled down Amira's spine. She didn't understand, not fully, but she felt the edges of something larger closing in. Why us? She whispered, almost to herself. His eyes sharpened, and for the first time, a shadow crossed his weathered face. Because this house, this land, holds more than you know. The next evening, Amira sat by the dim light of a single lamp. Her homework papers spread thin, but her mind refused to settle on equations and paragraphs. Her mother's voice drifted from the kitchen, hushed and strained. As she spoke with Mr. Callahan again, Amira strained her ears. Words floated across the thin walls. Loan, interest, foreclosure, council vote. Her pencil snapped between her fingers. She wasn't supposed to know the word foreclosure, but she did. Every child in their part of town knew it, like knowing the taste of watered soup or the feel of rain dripping through a leaking ceiling. When the voices quieted, Amira slipped onto the porch. Mr. Callahan stood there alone, leaning against the railing, his cane upright like a silent witness. He didn't turn when she approached. You shouldn't have to hear all this, he said quietly. But I think you already know more than most. Amira hugged her elbows. The night smelled of cut grass and something faintly metallic from the mills beyond the hills. They want this land, he continued. Your father borrowed when times were hard. He passed before he could repay, and the men he owed, they're not patient. They see your patched shoes and think you'll fold without a fight. Her breath caught. The words were heavy, too heavy for someone her age, but they carried a clarity sharper than any lesson at school. Mr. Callahan's jaw tightened. And I'll tell you this, one of those men, he sits on the council. He laughs at you in daylight and writes your fate at night. For a long time, neither spoke. Crickets filled the silence with their thin rhythm. Finally, Amira lifted her chin. Then they'll see me stand. The old man's eyes widened, startled not by her defiance, but by the echo of something he thought long buried. By the week's end, whispers followed Amira through every street. At school, at the market, even along the cracked sidewalks. That's the girl with the farm debt. She thinks she can save what's already lost. She'll fall like the rest of them. The words stung sharper than stones. but Amira pressed her shoulders back, letting the sting fuel her steps. In the market square, she spotted them. 3 men in pressed suits, laughing too loud for the hour. One leaned against a gleaming car, silver polished so bright it reflected the scorn in their eyes. Councilman Reeves. The name hissed in her memory like smoke. When he saw her, his grin widened. Well, if it isn't the little saint of patched shoes. His voice carried across the cobblestones, drawing stares from passers-by. Tell me, child, did you pray the debts away yet? Laughter rippled through his companions. Amira's fists clenched at her sides. For a moment she thought to stay silent, but then she remembered Mr. Callahan's words. They laugh because they've forgotten. She stepped forward, steady. Better patched shoes than a patched soul. Gasps fluttered in the crowd. The councilman's grin faltered. The silence that followed was heavier than any laughter. And though Amira's knees trembled beneath her skirt, she held his gaze, unflinching. The crowd shifted. Whispers spread. Something had cracked in the rhythm of the town. The market square still buzzed from the weight of Amira's words. Councilman Reeves' smile faltered only for a heartbeat, then returned sharper, thinner. He leaned close to his companions, muttering something that drew bitter laughter. But the crowd, ordinary townsfolk with baskets of bread, bolts of fabric, jars of honey, kept their eyes on Amira. She felt their stares like heat on her skin, but she didn't retreat. Instead, she shifted her backpack higher, bowed her head slightly, and walked away, not in defeat, but in calm refusal to let his mockery brand her. That evening, Mr. Callahan summoned her to his farmhouse on the hill. The air inside smelled of pine and old books, his walls lined with shelves heavy as secrets. He guided her toward a desk worn smooth by decades of hands. "Do you know what this is?" he asked, placing a thick leather-bound ledger before her. The book's spine creaked as it opened, revealing lines of neat, exact handwriting, columns of names, amounts, signatures. Amira scanned the ink, her brow furrowed. "Debts?" she whispered. "Not just debts," Callahan said. "This ledger is the council's shadow. Money that never reached the poor. Land stripped from families when crops failed. Names erased once the farms were swallowed whole." Her throat tightened. She traced the ink with her fingertip, halting at a name she knew, her father's. Next to it, a sum scrawled larger than life. "He never owed that much," she breathed. Callahan nodded grimly. "They inflated it. They always do. It's how Reeves built his empire." The room swayed with the weight of revelation. This wasn't just about her family. It was about dozens of families, generations silenced beneath false numbers. Amira's fists curled on the desk. "Then this proves everything." "It does," Callahan said, his voice low. "But proof alone is not enough. The council holds sway over judges, bankers, and even the sheriff. They'll bury this ledger before they let the truth breathe." Her heart pounded. For the first time, she understood the stakes. She wasn't fighting only for patched shoes or leaking ceilings. She was fighting for voices erased. Callahan studied her face, as if weighing whether her young shoulders could carry the fire now in her hands. "You must choose carefully," he said. "Once you step into this, there is no turning back." Amira closed the ledger softly, as though sealing a vow. "I've already stepped in, at the crosswalk when I chose to hold on." Callahan's eyes glistened. He placed a weathered hand over hers. "Then may your courage light what greed has long kept in darkness." 2 nights later, shadows gathered outside Amira's home. The sound of boots on dirt, the grind of engines idling too long. Her mother bolted the door, whispering prayers under her breath. Through a crack in the curtains, Amira saw them. Men in dark coats, their faces lit by the orange tip of a cigarette. Reeves' men. A heavy fist slammed against the door. "Open up." Her mother shook her head, pulling Amira back. But the door splintered inward anyway, revealing 3 broad figures who smelled of sweat, smoke, and arrogance. Reeves himself stepped through last, hat tilted, smile curved like a blade. Well, he drawled. The little saint of patched shoes lives humbly indeed. He let his gaze crawl over the crumbling walls, the patched furniture, the ceiling stained with water. A perfect place for a sermon on humility. Her mother's hands trembled. This is our home. You have no right. No right. Reeves cut her off with a laugh that scraped like gravel. I own your debt. That means I own this shack. And everything in it. He turned to Amira, his grin tightening. Including the brave little girl who thinks she can spit in the face of power. Amira's heart thudded. She forced herself to stand straight, though her knees wavered. This land is ours. My father, your father, Reeves sneered, was a fool, and you will share his fate, unless... He drew a paper from his coat, a foreclosure notice stamped with the council's seal. He slapped it onto the table, its sound louder than thunder in the small room. Sign it and walk away quietly, or stay, and watch everything you know crushed under my heel. The men behind him shifted, their fists like mallets waiting to fall. For the first time, Amira felt fear coil tighter than courage. The ledger burned in her memory, but here, in the shadow of Reeves' smirk, proof seemed powerless. Her mother reached for her hand, whispering, "Don't fight them, Amira, please." The room blurred through her unshed tears. Her chest heaved, her voice caught. For one breath, it seemed Reeves had won. The cane of Mr. Callahan wasn't there to steady her. The ledger wasn't in her hands. She was only a girl with patched shoes and a cracked ceiling. And as Reeves tapped his pen against the paper, Amira tasted despair. The bitter silence of justice swallowed whole. Reeves' pen hovered over the paper like a dagger waiting to drop. The lamplight flickered, catching the sneer on his face. His men shifted, shoulders filling the small kitchen, shadows stretching across the cracked floorboards. Amira's mother trembled beside her. The weight of the foreclosure notice pressed against the table like a stone slab on a grave. Reeves leaned in, his breath sour with smoke. Sign it, girl. Be smart for once in your life. You can't fight me. No one fights me and wins. The silence stretched. Even the ticking of the kitchen clock seemed to falter. Amira's fingers brushed the strap of her patched backpack. She thought of the crosswalk, the trembling cane, the roar of traffic, the choice she'd made without hesitation. Fear was louder now, but it was the same question, hold back or step forward. Her lips parted, and her voice came, not loud but steady. No. The word froze the room. Reeves blinked, then laughed. A deep, cruel sound. No? You'll regret that, child. I'll grind this place into dust. Your family will beg in the streets. Amira swallowed hard, but she didn't flinch. Maybe, but at least my soul won't belong to you. Her mother gasped, squeezing her hand tight. Reeves' laughter faltered. His smile turned brittle, his eyes sharp as broken glass. You think courage fills empty stomachs? He hissed. You think dignity keeps rain off your head? Amira's chest rose, her heartbeat wild, but her voice did not waver. No, but it keeps me human. And you gave that up long ago. The men behind Reeves shifted uneasily, glancing at each other. Something in her words struck deeper than they wanted to admit. Reeves slammed his fist on the table, rattling the paper. You insolent! Before he could finish, a knock thundered at the door. Then another. Reeves snarled. What now? The door creaked open, and Mr. Callahan stepped inside, cane in hand, his figure framed by the night. His eyes cut straight through the smoke and tension. This house, he said, voice like iron wrapped in calm, is not yours to take, Reeves. Reeves' face drained of color, then flushed red. Callahan, this isn't your concern. Oh, but it is, Callahan said, stepping forward with measured pace. The cane tapped the floor like a gavel. You've preyed on these families for years. Inflated debts, forged numbers, stolen homes that were never yours to claim. Reeves scoffed, though sweat traced his temple. Baseless accusations. Callahan raised the leather-bound ledger. Its spine glinted in the lamplight, the pages swollen with truth. Not accusations, records. Every signature, every lie you penned. This book has your fingerprints all over it." The room hushed. Even Reeves' men leaned closer, eyes widening. Reeves barked a laugh, but his voice cracked. "You think some scribbles will stop me? Judges are mine. The sheriff is mine. The council bows when I raise my hand." Callahan's gaze didn't falter. "Perhaps, but not the people. Not when they see how you feasted on their hunger. This ledger will not stay in shadows. It will be read aloud in the square, posted on every door, shouted in every church." Reeves lunged forward, hand outstretched to seize the book. But Amira moved faster. She stepped between them, her patched shoes planted firm, her hands gripping the ledger tight against her chest. Reeves' breath caught. For a moment, the scene mirrored the crosswalk, the rush of danger, the trembling step, the choice to hold on. "You won't silence me," Amira said, her voice trembling yet unbreakable. "You won't silence us." The crowd outside had gathered, drawn by the noise. Murmurs swelled into shouts as neighbors pressed to the windows, their faces lit by the flickering lamplight. Reeves' men shifted again, unease growing into doubt. One stepped back entirely, muttering, "I didn't sign up for this." Reeves' fury boiled. "Traitors, all of you." He turned back to Amira, his face twisted. "Give me the book, or I'll—" He never finished. Callahan's cane struck the floor with thunder. "Enough!" The shout carried through the walls, through the windows, out into the night. And for the first time, Reeves' voice was drowned out. Not by Callahan, not by Amira, but by the roar of the town. "Read it!" Someone shouted from outside. "Show us the truth!" cried another. The tide had turned. Reeves' smirk collapsed into something raw, something desperate. He saw the end written not in ink, but in the eyes of the people who no longer feared him. And in that moment, Amira lifted the ledger high. "This is our story, and it will be heard." The cheer that followed shook the night, a sound Reeves could not smother, a verdict no court could reverse. The square had never seen such a gathering. By morning, the sun spilled across cobblestones crowded with neighbors. Shopkeepers, farmers, schoolchildren, mothers with babies on their hips. They stood shoulder to shoulder, murmurs swelling into waves of demand. At the center, on a wooden crate borrowed from the bakery, Amira held the ledger. Its weight had nearly bent her arms, but now it felt like a staff of truth. Mr. Callahan stood at her side, his cane planted firmly, his voice ready when hers faltered. The first pages were read aloud. Each name carried like a bell. Families who had lost homes, children whose fields had been seized, widows whose debts had been doubled overnight. The crowd gasped, wept, shouted. And then came the names of the guilty, the councilman, Reeves foremost among them, who had twisted ink into shackles. Reeves himself was dragged to the edge of the square, his fine coat rumpled, his once slick hat trampled into dirt. His voice broke as he shouted denials, but every page of the ledger drowned him out. His men no longer shielded him. Some slipped away into alleys, others dropped their hats in shame. The sheriff, pale as chalk, stepped forward. For years he had bowed to Reeves, but the tide of people now surged behind Amira. He could not face them all. With a trembling hand, he tore Reeves' seal from his coat and cast it onto the ground. A roar rose. For the first time in decades, Reeves' power cracked. When the last page was read, silence fell. A heavy, awed silence. Amira lowered the ledger. Her patched shoes pressed against the crate as though rooting her into the earth itself. "This isn't just about my family," she said, her voice carrying across the hush. "It's about every family, every name that was stolen, every truth that was buried. We don't have to bow anymore." Her words lit the silence like sparks in dry grass. Applause broke. Cheers thundered. The people surged not in chaos but in unity, lifting her name, lifting her stance, until the whole square rang with something stronger than Reeves' wealth had ever bought. Dignity restored. Weeks passed, then months. Reeves' estates were stripped, his holdings divided, his empire reduced to dust and memory. The ledger became more than paper, it became a symbol. Copies hung in churches, schools, and shops, a reminder that silence feeds tyranny and truth, no matter how fragile, can shake the tallest towers. Amira returned to her patched shoes and her stitched bag, but she no longer walked with eyes lowered. Neighbors nodded to her with respect that no riches could command. Children pointed to her not with laughter, but with admiration. Mr. Callahan often sat on her porch, cane tapping to a rhythm only he knew. It started with a step, he would remind her. At a crosswalk, when the world rushed by and you chose to hold on. And indeed, the town itself seemed different. The bakery's warm air no longer smelled only of cinnamon. It carried the scent of shared resilience. The streets no longer hummed only with engines. They pulsed with voices raised together. In the evenings, Amira would pause at the edge of the square, where a mural now bloomed across the wall of the council hall. It showed a girl with patched shoes guiding an old man across a river of traffic, her hands steady, her gaze forward. Beneath it, words painted in gold. Kindness is the first revolution. The narrator's voice closes. In a world quick to measure worth by coins and titles, remember this. It was not power that saved the town. It was not wealth that toppled injustice. It was the courage of one who had nothing but dignity, and the choice to act when no one else would. Prejudice collapses, arrogance fades, but compassion, steady as a hand in traffic, endures. And perhaps the smallest act, the choice to hold on, can change everything.